Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And as we move slowly, well, not so slowly, this is the last week we'll be reading from the book of Numbers. And we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And
Amen.
Thank you. I'm going to pop us onto the share. And you can see here where we are. This is where we left off yesterday. So we're onto a whole different subject now, and here we go. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor, right? How many sections start off with that, right? That Hashem said to Moses to say, right? So that's rest, as Dr. Barmesh likes to say, Dr. Pamela Barmesh, following quote, right? So we'll go into that. Let's take a look. Sa et rosh malkoach hashavi. So this word sa rosh, lift up the head. We have had that phrase a number of times in the Torah already. And the first time that I remember it has to do with Joseph using it in a sense for the baker when he interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker, and he used this word sa et rosh, lift up the head, which he understood using the same expression both positively and negatively. But I really like the way Safaria translated it, which is to take inventory, right? Take an inventory. Malkoach hashvi, right? So shvi is captives, right? Captives. Malkoach is the booty, right? The loot, right? But Adam, so when it comes to it, referring now to Adam, human beings, Uvav Hema, and in the beasts, right? Cattle, that is sheep and cattle. Ata, you, ve'elazar hakohen, and Elazar hakohen, ve'rashe avot ha'edah, and the heads, the primary heads of the community, right? So take inventory of this. So what happened, just to give you some background now, we already read about the campaign that the Israelites had against the Midianites. And this was the result of that campaign. They had been very successful, and they had taken captives and booty. And Rashi actually has some really good things to say about about how to understand what's going on. Because notice, it just talks, if you notice, there's something left out in this. There are a couple of things that are left out, interestingly enough. I just realized one of them now myself, because it doesn't mention goats, but Rashi will mention something else where they don't have to take inventory. Okay, and that is the chattels, the movable goods. They didn't have to take inventory of it. So that this sentence isn't just a positive statement of what they need to do, but it's also a negative statement in the sense of what they don't need to do. So they don't have to take inventory. And I'm anticipating, sadly, Rashi a little later on, who's going to point that out to us in his inimitable way. Let's take a look at the Rashi here. Here we go. Sa et rosh, right? Take inventory. And he says, look at that. Kach et hacheshbon. Look at that. He puts it so beautifully in Hebrew. He says, take the number, right? Cheshbon is an account of, an amount, right? So take the amount. In other words, take inventory. Onwards. V'chatzita et hamalkoach, and you should divide up, right? Divide, it means it's going to be into two parts. You should divide up all the booty, right? All that is to say, what we're talking, malkoach hashavi, right? Bein tofsei hamilchama, between those who engaged in battle, hayotzim latzava, who went out to join the forces, right? Uvein kol hameda, and between the rest of the community. Let's take a look, see if there's a Rashi on this. There is. V'chatzita et hamalkoah. You shall divide up the spoil. Bein tofsei hamilchama, between those who engaged in battle, etc. Chetzio la'elu v'chetzio la'elu. So it's dividing it into equal parts, half to these and half to those. We don't have any Rashi for a while now. And Torah is going to tell us how they did this. It's actually very interesting, I think. All right. Right. V'haremote meches, and you should exact a levy, right? You should take up haremota. The harim means to lift up, take up a levy, exact a levy, l'Hashem, for Hashem, me'et anshe hamilchama, from those who from the men who went out to battle, hayotzim letzava, who joined forces, or who joined the forces, who went out in the force. Echad nefesh, and what is this levy? The levy is one person, mechamesh hameot, one soul of every 500, min ha'adam, from humans, umin ha'bakar, and from the cattle, umin ha'chamorim, and from the donkeys, umin hatzon, and from the sheep. Now, tzon usually refers to sheep, but it's quite probable, I would say, that here it is including the goats. All right, so that it is.
Well, here it does say sheep, but also, because I think of it as meaning flock as opposed to specific.
Nice, yes. And so often, by the way, it does get included. Goats are included. The small cattle, right? Or whatever that's termed, I think, agriculturally. So 1 in 500. Mimachatzitam tikachu, from their half you shall take, v'natata le'elazar hakohen trumat Hashem, and you shall give it to Elazar the priest as a gift, a donation to Hashem. So that's that. Umimachatzit bnei Yisrael, and the remaining half of the children of Israel, tikach echad achuz, you should take one. So again, a withholding. Le'echoz means to hold, right? In other words, so I really was struggling to try to translate this. It's not easy, but because the word achuz, as I understand it in modern Hebrew, means a percentage, right? But literally, I don't believe we could really say that here, right? A portion. You should take one portion of 50, chamishim, one of every 50, min ha'adam, from, so listen, look at that, right? Up here it's 1/500, one in every 500. Here it's one in every 50, min ha'adam, from the souls, umin habakar, from the cattle, min ha'chamorim, from the donkeys, min hatzon, and from the flock, mikol habeima, from all the behema, right? Cattle. So since it says behema here, I suspect here it is making it even clear that it does include goats as well, domesticated cattle, right? V'natata otam la'lavim, and they are to be given to the Levites, Shomrei Mishmeret, they who guard the Mishmeret, the responsibility, right? That needs to be guarded, Mishkan Hashem, of the tabernacle of Hashem. Vayas Moshe ve'Elazar HaKohen, and Moses and Elazar the priest did ka'asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, just as Hashem had commanded Moses. Going on. Vayhi hamalkoach, and it was this is the withholding, right? This is yeter habaz, above the spoil, more than the spoil, the loot. Asher bazazu, which they had plundered. Hatzava, that is the people of the army, right? Of the host, people who went out to do battle. Here we go. Tzon, as far as sheep are concerned, or flock, shesh me'ot elef, 600,000, v'shiv'im elef, 70,000, v'chameshet alafim, and 5,000. So this is the number of sheep that they captured, that they had captured. A lot of sheep. Okay. Here we go. There's a Rashi on this. Let me find it. So what is this yeter habaz? That's what's bothering Rashi here. In other words, over and above the booty. And he explains it very well. The fee, because shelo nitztavu laharim meches, because they were not commanded to take a levy min hametaltalim, from the movable goods, from the chattels. Ella, but only min hamalkoach, but only from that is to say, that was taken, right? Katav, Ela min hamalkoach, katav et halashon hazeh. So malkoach, comma. Katav et halashon hazeh. And for this reason, only from, okay, so again, just trying to clarify this, but from the malkoach, I won't translate that for a second, right? Katav et halashon hazeh, and he wrote it in this way. So I believe, again, Ela min halkoach, comma, katav et halashon hazeh. For this reason, he uses this language, this expression, vayhi hamalkoach sheba liklal chaluka. That is to say that the malkoach, right, this plunder that was to be divided up, right? That's why he said milkoach, right? He used this expression, ulechlal mesech, ulechlal meches, and it also had a levy. In other words, it was only from the malkoach, what he defines as the malkoach, which is the sheep, the cattle, the donkeys, that's and the people, right? The souls, that was the malkoach. That with the captives, maybe. Lakach is to take, right? Shahaya odef al baz hametalmatim, which was over and above, odef over and above the booty of the movable goods, asher bazazu am hatzava, which the people in the soldiers, let's call them, right, had plundered, ishlo, for each for himself. The lo ba lechal chaluka, right, and it did not come into needing to be divided. Mispar hatzon, the number of sheep, etc., etc. So I'm sorry if this was circumlocutive, but basically what he's saying is that it's saying there really was more plunder than simply the cattle, the sheep, the donkeys, and the people. They were the movable goods, but they were not, there was nothing commanded regarded them, and each soldier took whatever it was that he was able to and wanted to. And he did not have to share that with anybody else, just with his own family. But when it came to these things that needed to be, it came under a commandment to divide it up in this way. So let's go on. Now we go into the numbers themselves, right? We just did a little bit. Uvakar and cattle, Shnayim v'shivim elef, 270,000. In other words, 72,000 head of cattle. V'chamorim, and regarding donkeys, Echad v'shishim aleph, 61,000 donkeys. The nefesh adam min hamashim, and the souls, the human souls of women. They were women, asher lo yad'u mishkav zachar, who had never experienced the lyings of a male, literally. In other words, had never engaged in sexual intercourse. We had dealt with this in previous years as to this particular issue. So I would refer you back to previous parts that we did in this Parsha of Mattot. Kol nefesh, all the souls, Shnaim Ushloshim Aleph. 2,30,000, in other words, so 32,000 women. Vatahi hamechetza chelek hayotzim batzava, and regarding the half that was the portion of those who went out in the host, in the army, mispar hatzon. So if you divide 675,000 by 2, of course, right? Shlosh me'ot elef, 300,000, ushloshim elef, 30,000, veshivim alafim, and 7,000, v'chamesh me'ot, and 500. Okay, so the Torah's got the arithmetic down pat, right? It's interesting that it's actually giving us these numbers, but it wants us to, the Torah wants us to understand exactly what was going on here and to see how it was calculated.
Well, it's interesting because for the most part, and I see, we're looking down there at donkeys and it says 61, but for the most part, these numbers are, ending in zeros or
Yes.
occasionally a five, and that just seems odd that there would be so many that would be divisible by 100 or 1,000 or whatever.
Right. So yeah, that's it's a point that was made by another student of mine that these are not exact numbers, that they're, when it comes down to this, we probably are talking about exact numbers, but when we're talking about when we talk about the censuses that were taken, right, we are taking it here to the nearest 100, I suspect, right? And it's not necessarily an exact number. But for the purposes of documentation and teaching us, they're taking in these cases to the nearest 100, etc., etc. So yeah, I don't know if that's the point you were making too, Lauren.
Yeah,
Well,
that's fine. I mean, so they're rounding it up or down or
exactly.
something to
Exactly.
hundreds.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I think that's certainly that's part of becoming more sophisticated in terms of taking numbers and things like that, and knowing that that's information, that it doesn't have to be down to the last penny to be informative. In some cases, it may be important that it's down to the last penny, but in some cases, we need to understand that we want to go to the nearest, to the nearest 100, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So let's keep going on here. Vayhi hameches lashem minatzon, and the withholding, the levy that went to God from the sheep. So you're dividing it up, right? So 1 in every 50, right? I think is what it was, or was it 500? I think it was 50. Let's go back in here. Let's see, it says, was it back here? Yes. Sorry, my memory. Yes. Yeah, 1 every 500. 1 in every 500. That's the way it goes. Sorry. There we go. All right. So in figuring this out, okay. Finding the right place. Here we go. Right. So 1 in every 500. Shesh ma'ot chamesh v'shivim. So it's 675. Look at that. There we are. So because this is twice the half, right? That's how, and it's so it's going to be 1 in every 1,000 regarding of the total amount. That's why it turns out to be 675 sheep to Elazar, the priest.
Well, why did you put, oh, I get it. Here it says 675. Up there it said 675,000, but
Right, because that was
I,
how many they took in total. That was the total
but if it
number,
was one in every
500.
1,000, it would be 675, right?
Yes, but remember, this was coming out, it was important, right? This isn't fungible, right? It was coming out of a half of the soldiers. It was coming out of their half. That's the significant part. It
Oh,
wasn't,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So we have to think about that there was, I think, in that level, the fact that their gift, that is the soldiers' gift, went to Elazar, the high priest. And I'm going to suggest that there was an atonement value to the fact that it went to Elazar, the priest. Now, also there's a recognition that since it's one in every 500 and not one in every 50, that there's also a certain level of reward for the fact that these people potentially put their lives in danger, and that the level of their reward had to be greater. So I think there's a bunch of stuff going on here under the text, under these numbers, that is significant and suggestive of this particular. It isn't just blowing out numbers. It is also got a message behind it as well as to how it's actually being divided up. So going on, all right. We have to deal with the cattle. Habakar Shisha Ushloshim Aleph. So that's the half, right, of their half. 6 and 30,000, so 36,000, half of 72, right? Right. Let's find it. Okay. Umeches Lashem, and regarding the levy to Hashem, Shnaim Veshivim. So that's going to be 72. So 72 cattle, heads of cattle, to Elazar. Chamorim, we now have to deal with the donkeys. Shloshim elef chamesh meot, so that half turns out to be 30,500. Umichsam lashem, and again, one in every 500. Echad v'shishim, that's going to turn out to be 61 donkeys. V'nefesh adam, and regarding to the humans, the souls, right? Shisha Asar Elef. So again, the half of that would be 16,000. Umichsam Lashem, and the levy to God, Shnaim Ushlushim Nafesh.
You have 1,600 there, though.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Just add a 0.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you. So, okay. Vayiten Moshe et meches trumat Hashem, and Moses gave the levy of the gift of Hashem leElazar HaKohen, to Elazar the priest, kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe, just as God had instructed Moses. Okay, so let's see if here we go. Umimachatzit b'nei Yisrael asher chatzah Moshe, and from the half, this is the next verse. I'm so sorry. It goes on here. Okay. I am thinking this is actually a very good place for us to stop. And so I'm going to stop here. And okay. There we go. All right. Any comments?
Yeah, I was wondering about Moses' wife, Midian. How did she feel about the war?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know how to answer that question, I must tell you. How did she feel? Only left for us to imagine. Tell me the point of your question.
Well, I was just wondering. I mean, her father was a tribal chief and the Midian tribe.
Midianite priest? Yes, he was a Midianite priest. Correct. So, good question. I mean, I don't know of any midrashim that discuss that particular issue. I mean, we're left to really speculate. Quite honestly, Harlan, I mean, what else can we do other than to say, look, she's the only wife that Moses had. We have to speculate as to what the nature of their relationship was. What else can we do? And to say that she'd been with him for quite a while now, right? Through 40 years, right? We don't know if she was even alive at this point. We just don't know. There's a lot of nothing but speculation as a result of the fact that we just don't have that information. I mean, it's a great question, but it's simply one to speculate on, right? That these were her people, but on the other hand, to what degree did she feel that what they had done to the Israelites was absolutely disgusting and awful? And a lot of Israelites died as a result of what they did. Okay, and remember, they wanted to be cursed, right, etc., etc. So, yep, I'm going to stop the recording.